Welcome to Healing Your Families. I'm Emily Penrod, and I help you as a parent go from frustration, stress, and overwhelm to calm, confidence, and joy so that you can achieve the quality of family life that you desire. That's what I want for you. And I'm excited to start our episode today. This is the second in our series on child development, or how your child's brain works. And today we're going to be talking about understanding neurological differences. Not all brains work the same. First of all, there is a difference between a child's neurological functioning and an adult. But there are other differences as well that I want to go into. So to begin with, we need to talk about our nervous system. This is, of course, the control center for all bodily functions. It's the transmitter and receiver, as well as the pathway for information flow. It determines how our body responds to changes in its internal and external environment. And it's comprised of the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which is that network of neurons that goes throughout our body. The peripheral nervous system is also comprised of the somatic and the autonomic nervous systems. And it's the autonomic nervous system that I want to talk about today. In his book, The Body Keeps the Score, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk gave a very intriguing description of this autonomic nervous system. He wrote, "All of the little signs we instinctively register during a conversation, the muscle shifts and tensions in the other person's face, eye movements and pupil dilation, pitch and speed of the voice, as well as the fluctuations in our own inner landscape, salivation, swallowing, breathing, and heart rate are linked by a single regulatory system. All are the product of the synchrony between the two branches of the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic, which acts as the body's accelerator, and the parasympathetic, which serves as its brake." End of quote. I love this description and his use of the word synchrony. These two nervous systems, sympathetic and parasympathetic, are working in concert. They're complementary. The sympathetic nervous system is also referred to as the fight or flight. It's activated in times of stress. It's activated when we exercise. It is activated anytime between when we see that our child is running out into the street in front of a car to when we come home from a long day at work and see the mess that the children have made in the house. The parasympathetic, the complement, is the rest and digest. This is what is needed when we're digesting our food. It allows the muscles to relax. So when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, the energy is being sent to our arms and legs, our limbs, our extremities. So we can run if we need to, or fight, or whatever needs to be done. And when the parasympathetic nervous system is activated, the energy is going to our digestive system. So we're better able to make good use of the nutrition from the food that we eat. They're both important. Ideally, the sympathetic is more like the emergency room, and no one really wants to live in the emergency room. The parasympathetic is the one we probably, neurotypical people spend the majority of their time in the parasympathetic nervous system. they're relaxed, they're able to digest their food, they're able to function smoothly in life. The challenge is those situations where the sympathetic nervous system is overactivated. In some cases, people are just living in it. They're in the sympathetic all the time. They're living in a state of high alert. For example, anyone living in a war zone where there's constant fear, shelling, bombs going off, or in a situation of domestic violence, they never know what's going to happen next. And sometimes we'll be talking a lot about our children with special needs. Children with ADHD or autism can get stuck in their sympathetic nervous system. Sometimes when the neurological processes are atypical, they're not happening the way they should. They have trouble activating the parasympathetic. And assistance is needed to do that. If someone in your family, maybe yourself, seems to be living in a state of high alert, we know it's not going to benefit them. They're going to have digestive issues. Long term, it'll lead to high blood pressure and other physical problems, but also a lot of mental and emotional stress and complications. So as they learn how to activate that parasympathetic, one simple tool is just deep breathing. When we inhale, like that gasp when we're startled, that activates the sympathetic nervous system. But when we exhale, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system. In many breathing techniques and people who practice yoga or meditation or hypnosis, hypnobirthing is an excellent example of how we can activate the parasympathetic when we need to. But the practice is, for example, to breathe in to the count of 4 and exhale to the count of 8. In other words, to make that exhale twice as long as the inhale. And this signals the muscles that we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. We're signaling the muscles that it's time to relax, that they can calm down, everything's okay. So we can teach these techniques to our children, teach them these breathing techniques, teach them coping skills, signals they can use to calm down, to activate the parasympathetic, stress balls, service animals, especially for children with anxiety or anyone with anxiety, are very useful. They help them activate that parasympathetic nervous system, get out of that sympathetic. And in some cases, medication is needed. Now, we mentioned that the child's brain is not functioning like an adult. That's because the adult brain and spinal cord begin to form in the 3rd week of the embryo, of embryonic development. And it develops from the bottom up. In other words, the brain stem, the amygdala, what is often referred to as the primitive brain, begins to develop first. And then over years, the rest of the brain, the neurocortex, or the part of the brain where the logic and reasoning takes place, is the last to develop. And we need to understand with young children that they're operating from the emotional side of their brain. The emotions, the amygdala is the location for the emotions. And it may not be helpful to try to have a lengthy, logical discussion with them or to use rational arguments. We need to relate more to their emotions. The imagination is very active. Be aware of that. And young children tend to blame themselves for what's going on around them, even if it would seem so obvious that it couldn't possibly be their fault, like a parent losing a job or a divorce. It's very important to make sure that there's communication, that you're in touch with your child's feelings and their perceptions, and you're helping them understand that it's not their fault, that this is an adult problem, the adults are in charge, and they're taking care of it. This is especially true during a divorce. Parents are tempted to, of course, get comfort and validation from their children. But again, their brain is not fully developed. They're not able to process this adult information. It confuses them and traumatizes them. In another episode, I interviewed Rosalind Sadaka. She's the founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network, and she had excellent advice. And she is an expert on the most effective communication before, during, and after a divorce. And this is critical to understand and implement because of that child's neurological development. Now, keeping in mind that prefrontal cortex, that the seat of the reasoning and the logic, is not fully developed until the mid-20s. Parents of preteens and teenagers, pay attention to that. You know they're at that time in life when they're making those critical decisions that will impact them for decades. They're deciding whether or not to experiment with illegal drugs or alcohol, or whether or not to become sexually active. This is a time in their life when they really need a trusted adult mentor. They need guidance. They need structure. And if you've been able to establish that rapport of trust before the onset of puberty, and you can maintain it through those teen years, you can be that mentor. And you can be the one that they come to when they're faced with these life-altering decisions. And of course, you can make sure that there are other trusted adults in their lives. I don't think it's ever possible for a child to have too many positive role models in their life. This is really a blessing. It's huge. So, in addition to the difference in the development, there is, as we mentioned, the neurotypical processing and the atypical. And again, for children with ADHD and autism, many say they're wired differently. Their brain just doesn't function like ours. I want to talk about some critical areas that we need to be aware of and sensitive to and know how to address. The first one is the brainwave activity, which we measure with EEGs. And I want to explain the different levels of brain activity first, and then why it matters and how we can work with them. So the highest level, when the brain waves are just really going fast, is gamma. Have you ever had that experience when you're working on a project and it's like your brain just starts humming and you're getting creative and answers are coming to you? It's a wonderful, exciting feeling. That's the gamma level, the highest level of brainwave activity. That's the positive side of it. The negative side of it is that's the state when you're feeling extremely anxious and worried and your thoughts just won't stop. But that is the highest level of brainwave activity. Right below it is beta, and that's the level we're in the majority of the time. That's probably where you are right now. You're listening, you're able to function in your day-to-day life, remember what you need to do. And of course, this is essential. These two, gamma and beta, our highest levels of brainwave activity, are really important to us, but again, it would not be good to stay there all the time. It would be exhausting. So below beta, we have alpha. And alpha is the state you're in when you're not really focusing on anything. You're just kind of letting your thoughts float in and out of your head. You're just relaxed and comfortable. And people who practice meditation or hypnosis are very familiar with this brainwave activity level. Right below it is delta, which also can be achieved through meditation or hypnosis. Most commonly, that's dreaming sleep. That's that important part of the REM cycle when you're asleep, but you're dreaming. And below that is theta. This is the slowest level of brainwave activity. That's that deep, soundless sleep. And research has shown that it plays an important role in healing. Patients who undergo surgery have been found to recover much more quickly when they're able to reach that theta level, that deep, soundless sleep. So we can see that all of these levels are important. We need all of them. The challenge is getting into the right level at the right time. For example, there may be times when you're in alpha and you really need to be in beta. And this is when we access that mind-body connection. We get up, we get moving, we get the blood pumping, and we can help our children learn that too. Children with ADHD are quite often at the gamma level. This makes it extremely difficult for them to focus. And it isn't helpful just to say, pay attention, look here. What's needed is a way to slow down that brainwave activity. Again, teaching them those coping skills that help them manage that level of brainwave activity can be critically important. There is also the issue of sensory perception, and this applies especially for people with autism, and in some cases ADHD as well. But the atypical response is to be hypersensitive to sensory input, such as sound or smell or touch. This is why I consider it to be very important to always make sure that anyone, especially a child, is okay with hugging. And we've all been careful with hugging now during the pandemic, but pandemic aside, there are some who are so sensitive to touch that being hugged is not a pleasant sensation for them. They're not comfortable with it at all. And what feels like a tap to you could feel like a slug to them. And sound. What sounds like just a loud noise to you could be deafening for them. And in these cases, they experience a sensory overload. They're so bombarded with all this input from their senses that they have a meltdown. And it's important to understand the difference between a meltdown and a temper tantrum. They look the same and can be easily confused, but they're very different in terms of cause and the most effective response. So a temper tantrum happens when a child doesn't get what they want. Remember, they're operating from that emotional side of their brain, and all they know is they're not getting what they want, and so they're going to try anything they can think of to get what they want. They want it, and they want it now. So they'll try banging their head, kicking, screaming, crying, whatever they can think of in an attempt to get this item that they feel they must have right now. And some parents are tempted just to give them what they want. The problem is, this teaches them, yes, this is the right way to get what you want. Just engage in these behaviors and you can get whatever you want. So that's not effective. And neither is it effective to tell them to knock it off, to yell at them or become angry. That's just adding your temper tantrum to theirs. The most effective way is to remain calm. If you're at home and you can leave the room, quite often that works. Once they discover they've lost their audience, they may stop. What is needed is helping them learn more effective ways to get what they want. Teaching them negotiating skills, teaching them the value of waiting, and even teaching them that we can't always have what we want when we want it. Remembering that the ultimate objective of parenthood is to raise an independent adult who's able to take care of themselves, make their own decisions. We're not preparing them for the realities of life if we teach them that they can have everything they want when they want it. There's nothing wrong with helping them understand that they can't always have what they want when they want it. Sometimes they need to wait. Sometimes they need to work harder and earn it. Sometimes they just need to do without, and it's okay. They'll become a more responsible adult. In the case of a meltdown, what's happening is the nervous system is just overwhelmed. It's just too much information, too much sound, too much smell, too many sights. This happens frequently when they go to a store that's very busy, full of people, a lot of different sounds, a lot of different lights flashing, a lot of different visual input. It's overwhelming. They can't deal with it. And what is needed is to lessen that impact. If at all possible, quite often the best thing is to simply remove them from that environment. But there are those times when a parent of a child with special needs to get to the store. Maybe they need to pick up their child's medication, and they don't have a safe place for their child to go. They need to take the child with them. And the rest of us are not supporting them if we give judgmental looks or comments about people who can't control their children. Compassion is needed. One mother told me she appreciated the strangers who would calmly offer to help. Is there anything I can do? And remember, in this situation, maybe they're just trying to get what they need to get, pay for it, and get out of the store. And they can't necessarily remove them immediately, but they can, maybe the child's do what they can to lessen that sensory stimulus. Maybe give them a drink of water or remove a layer of clothing or something like that. So she says when someone asks her, she'll say, yes, please get me some water or something like that. But the meltdown is totally different. It has a different cause. It's not a child not getting what they want. It doesn't stop when you give them what they want. What is needed is relieving that sensory input, and that's the wisest way to handle it. These atypical neurological processes show up the most at school. This is where parents quite often find their greatest challenges. In addition to all of these factors we've mentioned, remember, school is a new environment. Sometimes there are crowded hallways and there's too much noise, there's too much sensory input. And working with your school on ways that can be reduced is very beneficial. There is also the issue of different learning styles, which isn't necessarily a neurological process, but there are many different ways to learn. And it is important to know what your learning style is and what your child's learning style is, and make sure they're compatible. For example, an auditory parent who is constantly talking to their child, sending information, communication. This is what you need to do when you get home from school. This is what the schedule is for tomorrow. May find a lot of frustration when they're dealing with a visual child. A lot of communication that's lost. They may find it much simpler to simply put a calendar up in the kitchen that lists what needs to be done when they get home from school, what the schedule is. Understanding your learning style, making sure you're communicating with your child and their learning style is beneficial. Also, sharing this information with your child's teacher so they know the best way to relate with your child. Some parents believe if kids just need more incentive, if we tell them if they get better grades, then they can have more screen time, or maybe we'll pay them for getting good grades. And we'll get to the issue of grades in a minute. But the problem with that, I want you to imagine this scene. There is a rope that is strung from the top of one skyscraper in New York across the street to another skyscraper. And you're taken to the top of this building and you're told, all you have to do is walk across that rope and I'll give you $500. Now imagine that it's a stormy day. Visibility is poor. The wind is blowing. It's pouring down rain. And now they're saying, well, we'll give you $1,000, maybe $5,000. And you're looking at this situation and you're realizing, I may not live to collect however much money they're planning on giving me. Would you do it? Probably not. And for a atypical neurological child, this quite often is what their school situation becomes. It looks impossible. It looks dangerous. So, if we are able, using these techniques I've talked about, the breathing techniques, the coping skills, learning how to activate the parasympathetic to manage the brainwave activity, if we're able to implement those, putting them in a setting, teaching them using their learning style, that's like building a solid bridge with handrails on a sunny day. That is much more effective than just offering them some incentive. They'll respond much more to that. Well, helping families not only heal but thrive is my expertise. And as a parenting and family strengthening expert, I'm dedicated to helping you create the family of your dreams. My proven program is Healing Families. It's designed to give you the information and the support you need to become the best version of yourself so you can become an even better parent. So we start out with an assessment to find out where you are, set some goals to find out where you want to be, and then map out a plan to get from where you are to where you want to be. And along the way, I provide the tools, training, support, and accountability. Visit my website, healingyourfamilies.com, for more information on improving communication and strengthening relationships in your family. You'll find a link to subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's where I put all of my 1-minute parenting tips that I post on social media every weekday. And you can sign up for a complimentary 30-minute consultation. Bring me your greatest family challenge, and I'll bring my best solutions. Thank you for joining us today. Join us again next week at the same time. And next week we'll be talking about your role as the master programmer of your child's subconscious mind. Until then, love yourself, and love your family. We're making the world a better place, one family at a time. This is Emmylou Penrod with HealingYourFamilies.com.